Hola chicos, today we're going to talk about el pretérito versus el imperfecto. Now this can be really hard for a non-native speaker of Spanish, but I think that by watching this you'll have a much clearer idea of when to use which tense. They're both past tenses, so this is for description and discussion in the past. Una vez fui al campo. We're going to use camping vocabulary from chapter 1 in order to illustrate the difference between the preterite versus the imperfect. Now we'll start with the preterite, el pretérito. The preterite is used for specific actions or events that move a story forward. So you need to ask yourself, is this an action or a condition? If the answer is this is an action, then you're going to use the preterite. You would use the imperfect for something that is not moving the story forward, a condition, a circumstance, etc. So el imperfecto is used for background information, circumstances, repeated or sustained actions with no specific beginning or end. You need to ask yourself, is this part of the main action, or is this what was going on while the action was taking place? And if your answer is, this information is backdrop for the main action, it is not moving the story forward, then you use the imperfect. Okay, here we're gonna say hello to our amiguitos from the regular show to illustrate the imperfect. All right, we'll do this in English first because I think it helps give you a mental picture. It was a dark and spooky night. We were all sitting around the campfire. We were all screaming. None of these things are moving the story forward. They are saying what was happening, perhaps when something else occurred. So you're going to use the imperfect with each of these circumstances. And here they are in Spanish. Era una noche oscura y lúgubre. So you use the imperfect because we are saying it was a dark and stormy night, or it was a dark and spooky night. And lúgubre, we're having an SAT moment here. Lúgubre means spooky, or you might see the word in English lugubrious. Nos sentábamos alrededor de la fogata. We were sitting around the campfire. Todos estábamos gritando. We were all screaming. Okay, again, these are backdrops for the main action. This is what was occurring when other things happened. So then we're going to illustrate the next part with the preterite. Again in English to give you a mental picture. Suddenly it began to hail. We realized we had no shelter. We got in the car and went home. And here they are in Spanish. Ejemplos del pretérito. De repente empezó a caer granizo. Suddenly it began to hail. De repente is a wonderful expression that I want you to remember. It means suddenly, and it's used often with the preterite. Nos dimos cuenta de que no teníamos refugio. We realized we had no shelter. Nos dimos cuenta is obviously in the preterite, but teníamos, you might see there, is in the imperfect. We realized that the circumstance was that we did not have shelter, so therefore you use the imperfect with that second verb. Subimos al coche y regresamos a casa. We got in the car and we went home. Now notice too in the first example, you might say to yourself, well, I always thought weather was used with the imperfect. Well, when you're talking about weather as an event, you're going to use it as the preterite. So here we're saying something began, which is an action, okay? So it began to hail is different than it was hailing. Okay, so now we have some expresiones clave. The chances are if you recognize this is part of the preterite, these expressions are part of the preterite, it's going to make things a lot easier for you on a test or a quiz. So if you see something like una vez, a la una, a las dos. For example, it happened once at 1 or 2 o'clock. Or el lunes o miércoles, it happened once on a Monday or Wednesday or other day of the week. Ayer, anteayer, hace 2 días, which means 2 days ago. Remember, hace plus time expression is something ago. Okay, anteayer is just the day before yesterday. It implies that it happened once and it was over and done with at that time. Anoche, el verano pasado, el año pasado. It happened once or a specific number of times. So for example, el verano pasado, if you went to Disney World, okay, that would be the preterit, all right? If you went to your grandma's house 3 times last summer, that would also be the preterit. Okay, any sustained action that you did over the last summer, if you do not imply that the summer has ended, you would use the imperfect. Un día, una semana, un mes. El 4 de julio, el 27 de enero, etc. If it's a specific date, you are implying that that is an action, and therefore you're going to use the preterit. Esta mañana, esta tarde, etc. Okay, all of these are pretty good indicators that a preterit verb is going to follow or is the closest thing to this expression. And we're going to do the same thing for el imperfecto. Okay, we have muchas veces, many times. See how there's no specific number of times? It's just implying that it was a repeated or sustained action. Los lunes, los miércoles, a sustained habitual action on Mondays or Wednesdays. Cada semana, cada día, cada mes, okay? Each week, okay? Remember, cada means each or every. Todo el día, toda la noche, all day or all night. Todos los días, todos los veranos, so every day or every summer. Generalmente, frecuentemente, con frecuencia. Okay, all of those imply sustained actions or, you know, with nothing with a specific beginning or end. Siempre or nunca. A menudo, de vez en cuando. Durante las vacaciones, a repeated action. Okay, so if it's something that you did once while you were on vacation, that's different than something that you did every day while you were on vacation. So if you went to the beach every day on vacation, that would use the imperfect. If you went parasailing once, that would be the preterit. Okay. I also added here another way to look at the imperfect because the imperfect, I think, can be a little bit less straightforward than the preterit. So here's some other helpful ways to remember when to use the imperfect. Weather. Okay, we talked about weather as event, which is different than weather as backdrop. Okay, so we have weather as in hacía frío, llovía, nevaba, like it was cold, it was raining, it was snowing. All of that implies that it's backdrop. But if it's weather as an event, for example, anoche llovió mucho durante la tormenta. It rained a lot during the storm. That's going to be weather as event. That's an action that's moving the story forward. Telling time. Anytime you're telling time, era la una, eran las tres, era el lunes, era febrero. That is going to use the imperfect. Location. Estaban en el bosque, iban para la casa. Again, what they were doing or where they were, those are conditions, so therefore you're going to use the imperfect. Anytime you're describing age in the past, you must use the imperfect. Yo tenía 6 años, era joven, era viejo. Appearance. Llevaba un suéter, era alto. Emotions. Estabas nervioso, me sentía triste. Again, they are conditions and therefore are not moving the story forward and must use the imperfect. Attitudes and desires. For example, quería una bici, necesitaban comprar un coche. Okay, these are things that they needed to do or wanted to do or hoped to do. Therefore, they are not actions. They are conditions or attitudes and desires.